All right. Looks like someone is getting ready for some serious investment decisions. You sent over weekly 2002-5013 HAR. That's a hefty financial report. Looks like we're diving deep into global markets this week, economic trends, and even a look at a few specific companies. Ready to get started?
Absolutely. Let's unpack it and see if we can find those hidden gems, those potential risks, and maybe even some opportunities you might have missed at first glance.
Okay, so let's start with the U.S. stock market. Things have been a little, how should I put it, bumpy.
Yeah, a bit of a roller coaster, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. Strong job numbers, but then this lingering worry that inflation might be creeping back. It's like the market doesn't know what to think.
Well, and it's fascinating, really, because what we're seeing here is this interplay between economic forces and, well, political uncertainty. The report actually points to a potential Trump 2.0 effect on the markets.
Trump 2.0 effect.
Yeah. Essentially, think of it as like a potential return of policies we saw during his previous administration. Tax cuts for corporations, more infrastructure spending, a real focus on U.S. manufacturing. And these policies, just like before, could create both positive and negative impacts depending on the sector.
So you're saying some sectors might thrive, others might struggle.
Exactly. So for instance, tech stocks, they're expected to potentially, soar with things like deregulation and AI advancements. But on the flip side, they could also be hit by trade tensions, particularly with things like sensitive technologies like AI chips,
So like a double-edged sword for tech.
Precisely. Now, on the other hand, if you look at small cap companies, particularly those represented by the Russell 2000 index, they're actually projected for some pretty significant growth. They could benefit from policies that really favor U.S. manufacturing.
I see. And what about industries that are really labor-intensive?
That's where things get interesting, right? Because sectors like retail, restaurants, those kinds of labor-intensive industries, they could actually face challenges. If immigration policies become more restrictive, it could lead to higher labor costs, and that could eat into profits.
So with all this uncertainty, what's the best way to even approach investing right now? It's kind of confusing.
Well, the report suggests a balanced approach.
Yeah.
Diversify. Think about a mix of tech stocks, value stocks, small caps. It's about managing risk, but also being positioned to capitalize on those potential growth areas.
So, okay, that makes sense in a general way, but how do I actually apply that to like my own portfolio and my own investment goals?
Well, think of it like building a house. You need a good foundation, right? And in this case, that foundation is understanding your own risk tolerance. Are you comfortable with a little more risk for potentially higher returns, or do you prefer a more conservative strategy? And then think about your goals. Are you in it for the long haul, long-term growth? Or are you looking for something more immediate, some income? Once you've got those pieces in place, then you can start aligning your investments with these trends we've been talking about.
That's a great analogy. I like that. Okay, so we've talked about these broader market trends, but I also wanted to get into some of these specific companies the report mentioned. There were a couple that I was really intrigued by.
Yeah. There are some definitely intriguing narratives unfolding.
What stories caught your eye?
Well, for instance, there's NVIDIA. The CEO there is really making a push into AI and robotics, which seems promising on the surface, but, stock actually took a bit of a hit recently.
I wonder if that has anything to do with those export restrictions on AI chips we talked about earlier.
Bingo! You got it. The report actually specifically highlights how those new export restrictions are directly impacting NVIDIA's business.
It's amazing how these, seemingly unrelated events can actually have huge consequences for specific companies.
It really is, isn't it? Now, another company that I found interesting was Sana Biotechnology. They're working on this diabetes treatment, and it's showing some early promise, but it's still very much, high risk, high reward territory.
Yeah, definitely not for the faint of heart.
Exactly. Now, the last company I wanted to touch on is Constellation Energy. They made this huge acquisition in the clean energy space, which could be, it could be brilliant or it could be a bit of a gamble.
It's like we're trying to solve a giant puzzle here, trying to figure out how all these pieces are going to fit together in the future.
The best kind of puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Well, we've explored the U.S. market a bit, but this report also mentions some mixed signals coming from emerging markets.
Oh, right. Should we even be paying attention to what's happening over there? What's the outlook?
Well, emerging markets are definitely worth considering. They present unique opportunities, but of course they also have, their own risks.
Can you elaborate on that? What kind of opportunities and risks are we talking about?
Okay, so take China, for example. Now, their economic growth is slowing down a bit, but they're actively trying to stimulate their economy, which could create some opportunities for companies that are really focused on the domestic Chinese market.
What about India? They seem to be doing well, economically speaking.
Yeah, India is expected to see some pretty accelerated growth in 2025, driven by a growing middle class. And, the government is really making an effort to attract foreign investment. So definitely potential there.
But, I mean, there must be risks too, right?
Of course, of course. I mean, with China, trade uncertainty is still a big concern. Those ongoing trade tensions with the U.S. and other countries, it just creates this unpredictability that investors need to be aware of.
And India.
Well, even though India's long-term prospects seem promising, they still face those bureaucratic hurdles, and infrastructure limitations.
Okay, so it sounds like investing in emerging markets, it requires a really deep understanding of what's going on in each specific region, right?
That's it. You can't just take a one-size-fits-all approach. You have to really understand the nuances.
Okay. Before we move on, let's talk about bonds and commodities. Anything interesting happening there?
Well, bond yields are definitely something to keep an eye on. They've been rising, which could be a sign of future inflation worries,
Okay, that makes sense. What about commodities?
Well, oil prices are up right now due to a bunch of things.
Mm.
Cold weather, some geopolitical events. Definitely something to watch, especially if you're invested in, the energy sector.
What about gold? How's that looking?
Gold's still seen as that safe haven,
Mm.
especially when things are, a little uncertain.
So bonds, commodities, they're sending some mixed signals too. It seems like there's a lot to consider.
Oh, there always is. But you know what? We're not done yet. I actually spotted something really intriguing that you might have missed.
Really? Tell me more. What did you find?
Did you happen to see the part of the report that mentioned this increase in human metapneumovirus, HMPV, cases in India?
To be honest, I did not. What's HMPV?
It's this respiratory virus, and it's been spreading in India, And while the report doesn't explicitly connect it to investing, I think it's something to think about, particularly when it comes to investments in, say, healthcare.
Ah, I see what you mean. A big health concern like that could definitely have an impact on healthcare systems, pharmaceutical companies, maybe even global markets, right?
Exactly. It's all about making those connections and seeing how things that might seem totally unrelated can actually have these ripple effects.
This is why I love these deep dives. You always catch these things I would totally miss on my own.
Well, that's the fun of it, right? There's always something new to discover. Shall we keep exploring?
Absolutely. Let's see what other insights we can find. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground: U.S. market trends, emerging markets, the potential impact of things like tax cuts and deregulation. But I'm ready to dig a little deeper. What else did you find in these reports that really stood out to you?
Yeah, one thing that really jumps out is the potential of AI. I mean,
Yeah.
we talked about NVIDIA and their focus on AI, but it goes way beyond just one company. It's like this thread that runs through the entire report,
AI is definitely a hot topic, but it's also kind of overwhelming. Where do you even begin to understand how it impacts investments?
Right. Well, what this report suggests is that we're on the cusp of this major technological shift, almost like a new era where AI reshapes entire industries. And that, of course, presents both incredible opportunities and any challenges for investors.
Okay, so AI is a game changer. But where do we even start looking for opportunities?
Well, think about healthcare, right? AI is already being used to diagnose diseases, personalize treatments, even assist in surgery. And then there's finance, algorithmic trading, fraud detection, even customer service with those chatbots. And of course, you can't forget transportation, self-driving cars, optimized logistics. It's really touching almost every sector.
Wow, that's a lot to process. So does this mean, if I want to invest in AI, I need to become some kind of tech expert?
Not necessarily. You can invest directly in companies developing AI tech, like we talked about with NVIDIA, or you can look at companies that are using AI to, improve their operations, gain a competitive edge. Think of a retail company using AI to personalize recommendations for customers or optimize their inventory.
So I don't have to pick the winners in the tech race itself, but rather how companies are using it effectively.
Exactly. And there's another layer to consider: the infrastructure that supports all this AI. Data centers, cloud computing, semiconductors, they're all essential parts of this whole AI ecosystem.
Ah, so it's like this whole supply chain that benefits from AI's growth. That opens up even more possibilities.
It does. The key is to really understand the different ways AI is impacting businesses and then look for investment opportunities across that entire value chain.
Okay, this is starting to make sense, but with so many options, how do I know, like, which AI investments are right for me?
That's where your research and due diligence come in. Look at each company carefully, their financials, their management team, the competitive landscape they're operating in, and of course their AI strategy. Ask yourself, are they using AI in a way that really adds value and gives them, a lasting advantage?
So AI investing is more like a marathon, not a sprint, huh? It takes patience, research, and a willingness to learn as the technology keeps developing.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And of course, you can't forget about the risks. AI is still a relatively new field, and there are definitely some unknowns, right? Regulations are changing, there are ethical debates, and the competition is fierce.
So proceed with caution, but don't ignore the potential. It sounds like AI is here to stay, and it's going to reshape the world as we know it.
I think so. And speaking of reshaping the world, let's talk about another big theme from these reports.
Yeah.
The shift towards clean energy.
Ah, yes. The clean energy revolution. What's the latest on that front?
Well, the report suggests it's more than just a trend. It's like a fundamental transformation of, the global energy landscape, driven by, of course, environmental concerns, but also by some pretty incredible technological advancements.
So it's happening, but is it just about solar panels and wind turbines? Where are the investment opportunities?
Yeah, renewable energy sources like solar and wind are becoming more and more, cost competitive, and governments around the world are supporting their adoption. But the clean energy story is much bigger than that.
Okay, so what else should we be paying attention to?
Think about energy storage, smart grids, electric vehicles, and even carbon capture technologies. Those are all important pieces of the puzzle, right?
Just like with AI, it seems like it's a very complex and interconnected ecosystem.
Exactly. And that complexity actually creates a really wide range of investment opportunities across different sectors. You can invest in companies that are directly involved in producing renewable energy, or you can look at those developing the technologies, the infrastructure that supports all of it.
So many options, but I imagine there are also risks associated with clean energy investments, right?
Absolutely. Government policies can change. Subsidies and incentives might disappear, which can definitely impact the profitability of clean energy projects. Plus, there's the challenge of integrating renewable energy sources into, our existing power grids. And of course, there's the constant evolution of technology. What's cutting edge today might be obsolete tomorrow.
It sounds like thorough research and careful consideration are, absolutely essential.
For sure. Now, before we move on, I wanted to circle back to something we talked about earlier. Remember those rising HMPV cases in India? I thought it might be interesting to connect that to some potential investment opportunities.
I actually did some reading on HMPV since you mentioned it, and it seems like it's becoming a concern not just in India, but, globally.
That's right. And this really highlights something important for investors. You have to stay informed about global health trends and their potential impact on various industries.
So it's not just about financial news. It's about keeping an eye on developments in healthcare, technology, geopolitics, even things like climate change.
Exactly. The world is interconnected, and events that might seem completely unrelated can actually have a huge impact on financial markets.
That's a great point. What other insights stood out to you from these reports?
Well, the growing importance of cybersecurity really caught my attention. As businesses become more and more reliant on technology, data, they also become more vulnerable to those cyber attacks.
Cybersecurity is one of those things we hear about all the time, but it's easy to kind of tune it out. Why should investors really be paying attention to this?
Well, because these cyber attacks can have absolutely devastating consequences for companies. Imagine data breaches, ransomware attacks, disruptions to critical infrastructure. They can really damage a company's reputation, cost millions of dollars, even threaten their entire business.
Okay, I see your point. That's a pretty compelling argument.
It is, isn't it? And this growing threat actually creates opportunities for investors. Companies that specialize in cybersecurity solutions are in high demand, and their services are becoming essential for businesses of all sizes.
So another sector to watch, another piece of the puzzle as we build our investment strategies. What else stood out to you?
Well, I also noticed the increasing demand for skilled labor, particularly in technology and healthcare. That's a trend that I think is really significant.
Right. We hear about the skills gap all the time, but I haven't really connected it to my investment strategy.
Think about it this way. Companies are struggling to find qualified workers for these in-demand roles. And that shortage can drive up wages, impact productivity, and even limit a company's growth potential.
So how can we actually factor that into our investment decisions?
Look for companies that are investing in their workforce, those that offer competitive salaries, benefits, and create a culture that attracts and retains top talent. Those are the companies that are more likely to thrive in this, competitive environment.
So we're not just looking at numbers on a balance sheet, we're also considering the human element, the workforce that's actually driving a company's success.
Exactly. And one final thought, I think the report really emphasizes the importance of, long-term thinking and diversification. Don't get caught up in short-term market fluctuations or chase the latest hot stock. Focus on building a portfolio that aligns with your goals, your risk tolerance, and your time horizon.
That's great advice. It's so easy to get swept up in the excitement of the market, but investing really is a long game.
It is. Remember, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. What works for one investor might not work for another. It's about finding what makes sense for you, doing your research, and staying informed.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. We've covered AI, clean energy, cybersecurity, even the importance of investing in human capital. What other fascinating areas will we explore in part 3?
We still have some intriguing discoveries to uncover. In our final part, we'll explore some potential surprises and hidden opportunities that you might not have even considered.
Can't wait. I'm sure there's much more to learn. All right, so we've talked about AI, clean energy. We even touched on how global health trends can impact investments. What other hidden opportunities did you find in these reports?
Well, one area that really stood out to me was this growing interest in space exploration and the commercialization of space.
Space exploration, I thought that was still mostly, government agencies, science fiction stuff.
It was, but things are changing fast. Private companies are getting involved in a big way, from launching satellites to even exploring, like asteroid mining.
Asteroid mining. That sounds like something straight out of a movie.
It does, doesn't it? But it's a real trend, and it's creating some pretty interesting investment opportunities. Think about companies developing reusable rockets, building space stations, even providing things like satellite-based internet and Earth observation.
Wow, so there's this whole, space economy emerging with potential for, massive growth.
Exactly. It's still early days, but this report suggests it could be a sector that really explodes in the coming years.
It definitely sounds like high risk, high reward. But for those who are, a little more adventurous, it could be pretty exciting.
For sure. Okay, so shifting gears a bit, another interesting opportunity the report highlights is this growing focus on personalized medicine.
Personalized medicine, what does that even mean?
Well, it's basically about tailoring medical treatments to each person's unique genetic makeup, their lifestyle, even their environment.
So it's like custom designed healthcare.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more and more possible thanks to advancements in things like genomics, data analytics, AI.
So how does this translate into actual investment opportunities?
Think about companies that are developing genetic testing kits, or companies that are analyzing huge amounts of data to identify disease patterns, or even creating targeted therapies for specific patient groups.
That's amazing. It's incredible to think we're moving toward a future where healthcare is so personalized.
It's a pretty exciting time to be following the healthcare space, that's for sure. And speaking of exciting developments, let's talk about one more hidden opportunity: the rise of the metaverse.
The metaverse, that sounds like something from a science fiction novel.
It does have that kind of futuristic feel, right?
Yeah.
But it's becoming very real very fast. The metaverse is basically a persistent, shared virtual world. People can interact, have experiences, even do business there.
So it's like a 3D internet.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
This report suggests that the metaverse has the potential to really revolutionize things,
Yeah.
Everything from entertainment and social interaction to education and commerce.
That's mind-blowing. But how do you even begin to invest in something so, abstract?
Well, look for companies that are building the infrastructure,
Yeah.
the virtual reality headsets, the software platforms, the tools for creating content.
So we're investing in the building blocks of this new virtual world.
Exactly. And like any emerging technology, there are risks, but the potential rewards could be huge.
Wow, this deep dive has been quite a journey. We've covered so much from, stuff that's familiar to stuff that's Totally futuristic.
We looked at the big picture trends, we zoomed in on some specific companies, we even uncovered some pretty surprising opportunities.
I feel like I've learned a lot, but I also feel a little overwhelmed by all the possibilities,
I get it. Remember, it all comes back to focusing on what aligns with your goals, your risk tolerance. You don't have to chase every trend. It's about making the decisions that are right for you.
Right. It's about being informed and, making smart choices.
Exactly. And never stop learning and questioning and exploring. The financial world is constantly changing. There's always something new to discover.
You're right. This deep dive has definitely inspired me to keep learning and keep exploring. Thanks for guiding me through it all.
It's been my pleasure. And hey, remember, the most important investment you can make is always in yourself. Keep learning, keep growing, and never stop looking for those hidden opportunities.
Wise words. This has been another great deep dive. Until next time, happy investing, everyone.